सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The hand of God rose just as the sword of the king's armies prepared to land on the necks of the rebels of Paris. The people, the diarist Pierre L'Estoile recorded, cheered the fanatic priest who plunged his knife into Henry III's belly in 1589. An angry subject declaimed the king was a bugger, son of a tyrant. Earlier reviled for his excesses with Venetian courtesans, Henry III was said to have later surrounded himself with jeweled and painted young men called mignons, blaspheming, fornicating, and following the king everywhere, the diarist wrote. For the pious, though, real responsibility for the regicide of 1589 lay not with the king, but a woman. The Queen Mother Catherine de Medici, today remembered as a great patron of the arts, was decried as a virago and sexual vampire who had emasculated her son. Even as the world contemplates the extraordinary spectacle of former US President Donald Trump being tried for making hush money payments to a porn star, one critical element hasn't got the attention it should. This is the first time in modern political history a man is being shamed for a sex scandal. The humor centers around the shape and size of Trump's penis, his obesity, and his lack of taste. The woman isn't being blamed. The change in gender narrative is at least as consequential as the wars and economic crises raging around the world. Patriarchy has been one of the most important forces holding up the world order, and perhaps, just perhaps, it's cracking. Large numbers of possible explanations exist for this historically exceptional disappearance of Eve and the serpent from the Trump narrative. Late in the last decade, the exposure of predators like Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein energized feminist movements protesting against abuses of women by powerful men. The rise of the social media could also have helped bypass editorial gatekeeping that protected elites. Liberals in the media, who were long mocked by Trump, might also be getting their moment of vengeance. Politics in the 18th and 19th century US wasn't devoid of this kind of sexual misconduct scandal. Federalist politicians attacked former President Thomas Jefferson's Congo harem, or his mistress of color, while William Henry Harrison was alleged to have seduced a teenage girl. The sixth president, John Quincy Adams, was even alleged to have used a sex worker to entrap Emperor Alexander of Russia. Yes, the honey trap isn't a recent invention. Libelous newspaper articles and abusive speeches were the stuff of politics. Like many religious societies, you see, Americans believed that a just polity had to be entrusted to moral leaders. The tremendous influx of women into the workforce in the late 19th century empowered some of them to assert that powerful men should not be protected by sexual double standards. Teenager Madeleine Pollard successfully sued the politician William Breckinridge, journalist Patricia Millard writes, for resiling on a promise to marry. From the early 20th century, though, the organized press colluded with political and financial power to keep personal scandals out of the public space. The affairs of Presidents Warren Harding, Franklin Roosevelt, and Dwight Eisenhower were widely known, but they only emerged into public light decade after the death of the leaders. The sexual life of President John F. Kennedy again remained largely unknown to the public. In a superb essay, the journalist Caitlin Flanagan points to the tragic impact Kennedy's affairs had on First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy. Fathered by an alcoholic, wife to a chronic womanizer, and then to an abusive, controlling tycoon, Jacqueline lived a life, and I quote, dependent on the kindness of sadists. Melania Trump today can make clear her disdain for her husband's behavior. Jacqueline Kennedy didn't have that choice. The media-politician compact did sometimes stare. Arkansas Congressman Wilbur Mills stopped his car in an accident and stripper Fanny Fox jumped out of it into a fountain and onto the newspaper pages. But her reputation was also destroyed in the process. Former Colorado Senator Gary Hart's presidential campaign in 1987 was undermined by infidelity charges. The problem was that apart from the men, the women also suffered. Donna Rice's reputation was destroyed in the process of bringing down Gary Hart. Leslie Smith's work on modern American sex scandals point to the existence of a manly manhood guard, which gives absolution to the men involved, even among morally straight-laced evangelical audiences. Figures like Rudy Giuliani, Newt Gingrich, and Arnold Schwarzenegger represented a kind of masculinity that people today sometimes call toxic, but then passed off as just honest and virile. To this, we might add the trope of the likable rogue and the wily but amusing predator. Monica Lewinsky was cast as a naive but sexually provocative siren, with the question of the power relationship with her and former President Bill Clinton receiving very little examination at the time. For the most part, President Clinton evaded the issue by apologizing to his nation and to his family, but not his young employee. The narrative Lewinsky later revealed in a biography had devastating personal impacts for her. Evangelism and white nationalism, Smith suggests, have been powerful carriers of an ideology which casts the nation as a childlike family in need of protection by a masculine father, and masculine fathers we know sometimes stray. The politicians who felt compelled to apologize for their actions, think John Edwards or Anthony Weiner, were derided as inadequate men. Like their counterparts in the US, European politicians of this period enjoyed similar immunity. The Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, accused of having hired sex workers and aspiring showgirls to give what came to be known as bunga bunga parties for his powerful guests, actually became something of a folk hero. For his working class supporters, scholar Alessandra Gribaldo observes, the use of wealth and power to own and possess women was something of an aspirational ideal. Mass media moral outrage directed at former United Kingdom War Secretary John Profumo paled in comparison with the abuse directed at the sex workers he was involved with. Christine Keeler and Mandy Rice Davies, barely out of their teens and from embattled families, were dismissed as call girls, journalist Sarah Hughes notes. The gaze on Trump shows we've come quite a way. Of course, the age of predatory men isn't behind us, but it does seem to be coming with costs for the perpetrators now. Last year, Japanese Liberal Democratic Party heavyweight Takeru Yoshikawa was eased out of his seat in the Japanese parliament after he was outed taking an underage college student out for drinks and then giving her 40,000 yen in cash. Another Japanese lawmaker, Hiranao Honda, was compelled to resign after saying, "I'm not far off 15 years old, but if I had sex with a 14-year-old, I would be arrested." It's strange. It isn't strange, but that's what he thought he could say. Long coerced into silence, women in Japan and many other countries have been organizing to push back against sexual harassment in the workplace and during job interviews, Thisanka Sripala reports. There isn't, of course, uniformly good news from everywhere. The hounding of former Finland Prime Minister Sanna Marin would have been unlikely, I believe, if she was male, as Van Badham writes. But change is becoming evident, with one exception. Totalitarian regimes don't embarrass political leaders in this way. Chinese tennis star Peng Shui simply disappeared from public view when she accused former Chinese Vice Premier Zhang Gaoli of sexual assault. Women's rights activists were shuttered out of social media and even detained after calling out powerful men for sexual assault or misconduct. Leonid Slutsky, head of the State Duma's Foreign Affairs Committee, was exonerated from charges of groping multiple women journalists, even though there was an army of witnesses. The sex scandal itself, the story of Henry III tells us, long predates the era of mass media. The discursive elements of the scandal have proved durable. Though the excesses of empresses, kings and popes titillated elite contemporary commentators, historian Michael Farquhar reminds us, they acquired political salience only when the violation of cultural norms was held to be responsible for harm to the body politic. harming women wasn't an issue. Henry IV redeemed the monarchy in France by relentlessly womanizing and fathering 6 illegitimate children. Finally, the Trump case shows there might be a crack in the iron fortress patriarchy has ensconced with around toxic masculinity. The fall of this fortress could bring about seismic changes for the world order itself. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm National Security Editor of ThePrint. Thank you for watching Security Code.